Okay. All right, everyone. Excited to have everybody here. Hopefully you've grabbed some food by now. Trey, is there some extras over there for if anybody wants some seconds? Is there more over there if people want seconds? Okay. If y'all want seconds, please don't be shy. We don't want to take any of it home. So anyway, my name is Pete Larkin. I am the president of the marketing chapter. This particular event is not, of course, just specific to marketing, but really glad to have y'all here. For those who are interested in joining the marketing chapter, if you're not already part of it, you can scan this QR code and find where to join. You can also just look at us up on the Silicon Slopes website. You can find us there. So scan it or search it, whatever. We're just glad you're here. These events, we're able to put these on because of our sponsors, and we're gonna bring up Trey here from Charlotte Rose's Barbecue here in a minute. We're really grateful for them. But really quick, this is one of my favorite things to do at the beginning of each event, is first to ask who here is currently looking, not just because there may have been layoffs or whatever, but maybe because you're interested in pivoting into a new role, but who's looking for work right now? And if you'd be so bold as to raise your hand. Okay, all right. Okay, we're going to ask you to raise your hand in a second again. And then second, whose companies right now are hiring? You raise your hands again? Okay, here are the companies these companies are hiring. If you wouldn't mind, if you're okay staying just a few minutes afterwards, we'd invite you to hang out over here near the couches right after the event if you know your company's hiring. And for those who are searching, if you want to come over here and connect with them, that would be wonderful. We've had a number of people who have found jobs from this chapter, and that's one of our goals, is to help people find work. So again, if you're hiring after the event, if you're hiring or looking, please come hang out over here by the couches. So thanks for that. And now onto our sponsors. Again, a huge thank you, and let's give him a round of applause as he comes up here to Charlotte Rose's Carolina Barbecue. Trey.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but technology is not my skill, nor is marketing, so I need you. Spread the word. This is homemade food. I am from Charleston, South Carolina. We moved out via North Carolina because my wife was teaching there. She's the smart one. And I do authentic Carolina barbecue. It's what I did back there, and hopefully y'all are enjoying everything. It's all homemade. Thank you. It's all homemade. We pride ourselves on that. If you are someone who does catering, please contact us. There is no item we can't do. We love it. I'm a chef. I'm happy to make arrangements to do things you're probably not familiar with or don't think I'd be familiar with. Or if there are items you have that you're allergic to or struggling with because of dietary restrictions, please let us know. Spread the word. I am the worst marketer on the planet. It is so embarrassing, and I would love to tell y'all I was exaggerating, but I am not. I need all the help I can get because I'm running everything, as you can imagine, being a small business. And as a result, I rely upon you and the goodwill that comes from people who've tried our food. Probably not the best marketing strategy, but I'm working on it. But I would love to cater for you, your company. I'd love for you to come into my restaurant. I would love for you to tell me about anything I could do to make your experience better. If there are items, if you have ideas, I am so into learning and trying new things. So if you're thinking, hey, have you ever thought about putting this on your menu? I would love to hear that. May not happen, but I love to try new things. And I also love to make new things. I have an Italian chef that works with me. He's from Italy. We're very close. He's like a second father type of figure to me and big brother. He's a great guy. And we just love challenges. His wife is a Spaniard from Mexico, so we make crazy things all the time at work. We're not just doing barbecue. And I'm telling you this so that you don't feel limited by options. We want to be your catering opportunity, or your catering reference, the people you want to come to for catering. And obviously, we'd love you to come in and eat with us. It's a very down-home place. It's very friendly. My staff are very friendly. We're Southern. We're going to say hi to you. We're going to ask you your name. We're going to talk to you. And you'll probably be uncomfortable by the time you leave. We might give you a hug. It's just we're weird like that. But I'm so grateful y'all had me. It makes all the difference in the world. We cater for Domo and several other companies down here, and it's what we love to do. We love to make big plates of food for everybody to try and sort of have that down-home experience. And I pride myself on when you leave, you feel like you had a good meal. I'm going to leave you with this. You don't get many options in life about your day. You can plan it. You all know this. But something is going to go amiss every day, right? No matter what you do. You plan well, but some things are going to go askew. But you get to choose what you eat. And I take that very seriously. I want you to have that food and feel like that was a good part of your day. The one part of your day that went right. Does that make sense? That's my big passion. Anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yes. I'm not sure if I mentioned I'm a terrible marketer. I need to meet with you individually afterwards, but if you have not, if you look at the board, it does not have my website on it. I don't know why, but I need to give you all that information. It's crcbbqut.com. I would love to give you my telephone number, my cell phone number. I'd love to give you the business cards that I forgot to bring. You have no idea. I wish it were hyperbole, but it's not, y'all. ADD is not a joke for me. People talk about it all the time. They joke about it all the time. I live it all the time. So I will. It's area code 919-244-6604. This is my cell, 244 Trae, Trae. And the last name is Eller, Eller. And you can text me anytime. You could call me, but I will tell you that texting is the best way to get me to get back with you because people call me with all sorts of things at this point that are not related to the business, and I unfortunately have to weed them out. But you can do it, and I will get back to you. It just might take a little longer than if you text me. If you text me, I'm pretty good about. That's the one technological aspect of my life I'm decent at. And I will. I'd love to meet with you individually. I'm going to be here the whole time. So if you have questions, you want information, you want to exchange information, I'd love to do that. I'm not leaving. I just did come. It sounds horrible. I'm so prepared. I was here 20 minutes early, but I'm not a good marketer. Someone else had their hand up. I apologize.
Oh, I was going to say, I have one of your cards, so if anybody wants to...
He has the one that I remembered. And I'm going to go look in my truck right now and see if I had some more. So, thank you all again very much. Please enjoy the food and go back. Finish it all. Don't leave me any. I want you to take it home.
Thank you, Trae. We really do appreciate you supporting this event, and it would be fantastic if we could all support Trae and his business as well. As far as marketing, that is something that I'm okay at. And if y'all receive the email to this event, then there's some hyperlinks to his website and to, I believe, their Facebook page. Either way, there's some links you can get contact there. And after the event, for everybody who registered, I'll also be sending out some links there. So, got you covered, Trae. Anyway, let's start into introductions. I want to keep this pretty short so Jim can do his thing. I am so grateful, Jim, for what you do, for what you've done for me and for so many others. Where I first became introduced to Jim, the Arbinger Institute, a friend of mine had said, "Hey, you kind of suck. You should read this book." They didn't say that, but if you've read the book, you get it. So sent me a recommendation to read Leadership and Self-Deception, and so I was like, hey, I love reading. I'm one of all the recommendations. I'm up for it. So I read it. It's fantastic, and if I could title the book, which I would never assume to do this, but Leadership and Self-Reflection is kind of how I also see this book, because it just sent me on just like deep self-reflection, and there are things that I learned about myself while reading that book, and I was just like, man, this is so good. What else is there? And so I read pretty much everything I could get my hands on, both of secular works and religious works that Jim has authored and worked on, and they have been of great blessing and benefit to my life. And so when I reached out to Jim about coming to present to the group, and when he said yes, I was just like secretly behind my computer screen, just like doing a little dance, because I was just like absolutely ecstatic. Jim is one of my favorite authors, thinkers, presenters. I've been blessed by the opportunity to see him speak in person at some different events. You may know of Jim, some of his past work with the Arbinger Institute, his best-selling author and works with The Anatomy of Peace, Leadership and Self-Deception, The Outward Mindset, and others. And then recently founding his new thing, which I'm sure he'll be talking about today, with the Withy Leadership Center. Am I saying that right? Okay, with Withy Leadership Center. So we are so excited to have you. Please welcome Jim Ferrell to the stage.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Okay, you guys. Well, thanks for coming. It's sunny outside. What are you doing here? That's question number one. So now, who's familiar with the work I've done, or just the work of the Arbinger Institute generally? Raise your hand. Okay. How about who's familiar with the newer work that I've been doing with Withy Leadership Center? Not going to be as many. Okay. So we're gonna dive into some ideas. So here's what I hope happens today. I want to share with you some ideas and some ways of saying things that will equip you to see organizations, what organizations are and what they mean differently than you've ever seen them before, and what leadership means differently than you've ever seen them before. And then what your own work would do and whatever endeavors you're involved in differently than you've seen it before, and give you some tools to help along the way. That's what I want to do. And we can have Q&A at the end, or as we go, too. If there are things that are coming up that aren't clear, let's chat. I'm so excited about the stuff we're going to dive into, so I hope it sort of reaches you the same way that it reaches me. And there'll be resources if you're interested in this stuff, want to go deeper into it. There's free stuff that I'll give you at the end too that you can get. So I want to start by sharing a study. Let's see, about chickens. Okay. Now this was a study done at Purdue University about 25 years ago, and by a group of scientists. And they were trying to figure out how they could raise sort of super chickens. Now, I suppose there are different ways you might measure chicken success, but the chicken success they were after was egg-laying success. So what are the superstar egg-laying hens, and how do you actually produce that outcome? And so this is what they set up in their experiment. They started with a big group of chickens. They're all in their separate groups. And they counted all the eggs that are being laid, and they took the number one egg-laying hen out of every group, and those hens were the ones that bred then the next generation of chickens, okay? And they did that for 5 generations. So the superstar, super chickens, they're the ones that are, having the next generation of super chickens, and we're going to measure that. The other way they did was not to take the best individual performers, but instead, at generation 1, take the group of chickens that as a group produce the most eggs relative to the other groups. Does that make sense? So not super chicken, but super team. And they use the super team hens to then breed the next generation of chickens, okay? And they continued that for 5 generations. Now, what happened was, the super chicken, the individual super chicken approach, produced fewer eggs every generation after. And by the 5th generation, they're almost producing none, and they're murdering each other and plucking each other and taking the feathers out. It's just a mess. In one of the groups, there was a group of 9 chickens. There were only 2 that were alive because the rest of them had been murdered. And those 2 had no feathers left. I mean, it's like all these chickens after each other. The super team approach, after 5 generations, every generation produced more eggs than the prior. And by the 5th generation, there were 160% higher egg production than when they started. So that's super chicken approach, super individual approach, and versus super team approach. Now, I want you to keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that as we dive into some ideas, okay? So, the big shift. So we're in the middle of sort of a moment, right? I mean, ChatGPT. Have you been playing on ChatGPT? That is scary. Who's had a ChatGPT write a paper for them? You can. There's no professors here. Okay. Yeah, I experimented. I had ChatGPT write a first chapter of a book. I thought, what the heck? Let's see what it can do. And it's crazy what it can do. So anyway, so we're in the middle of a moment, but we're in the more than a moment. This is actually a transition. We're in the middle right now. And since we're in the middle of it, sometimes it's hard to know what you're in the middle of. You have to look backwards to see what it was. We're in the middle, actually, a massive transition in era. That's what's actually happening. And ChatGPT and all this other stuff, those are one of the artifacts of this massive shift. And I want to get into this shift with you here for a moment. So this here is my grandfather, James Anthony Ferrell. And then this here is my father. My father is the second one from the right. He was an aeronautical engineer at the Boeing Company. Okay, they're basically the same person as human beings. They were separated by 25 years. My dad was born in 27. I think Grandpa was born in 1902. So 25-year difference in time. But Grandpa was a farmer and worked with his hands. And my dad designed jet airplanes. They're the same person. What happened was that the world shifted around them, okay? And in the way that the world's shifting around us now. And I want to sort of put some concepts to that shift. So think about, let's take sort of, we're going to span back and take kind of an evolutionary view of human work for a moment. And for most of human history, human work was about using your body, okay? Using your hands. And people who were strongest, who could do things physically the best and the fastest, they were the most highly valued workers in the labor force. So this is what I'm going to call the Era 1 economy, or the E1 economy, where people were valued for their physical abilities. This was most of the history of humankind, was this era, economically speaking, okay? But what happened with the advent of the Industrial Revolution that came in a series of waves is that machines increasingly took over the physical space. That machines could do the physical work, much of it, now most of it, better at a higher volume and with more precision than we human beings could do. And so the labor market, the physical body labor market, was disrupted by technology. And that sort of was the impetus from this move, this first shift from Era 1, where we're valued for being strong, to Era 2, where we're valued for being smart, okay? So the highest paying jobs, the most valued, were ones that are thinking ability jobs, they're brain jobs. And we've been in the middle. I mean, this has been a transition over the last couple hundred years, but especially the last 70 years or so, we've been smack dab in the middle of the E2 economy, the brain economy, the mind economy. And what's happening now is we're in this shift that's analogous to the shift between E1 and E2. We're going now from E2 to E3, and we're seeing a bunch of stuff coming up around that. Well, what's E3? Well, so with AI and everything that's happening, machines are getting smarter than we are, okay? So a lot of things that only human brains can work on, for all these years, actually a lot of those things already, mechanical brains, artificial brains can actually do more, do faster, be more precise, etc. And so that then's transitioning us, which we're in the middle of this now, into Era 3. So what is Era 3? Well, and we're going to dive into this in depth today. But here's my view of Era 3. That what's left for us as human beings, so bodies, we're not, in most cases, our bodies are not a competitive advantage. And in coming days, our brains even aren't going to be the competitive advantage anymore in many, if not most instances. But there's still something that's uniquely human, and it has to do with our relational abilities, okay? The ability to relate, because machines don't have interiors, they don't have insides, they can't, there's no empathy there. There's no way to really sort of have this deep sort of seeing and connection and relation. Machines can't go there, but human beings can. Here's a quote recently by the incoming president of Columbia University. She said this: in the past, jobs were about muscles. Now they're about brains, but in the future, they'll be about the heart. Okay? And the heart, the way we're going to dive in today, the heart has to do with our unique relational ability as human beings and why that matters. So if you just look at this sort of pictorially, we've got these three factors sort of. We've got the physical side of us, we do things physically, the intellectual side of us, the relational side of us. Machines are taking over, they have taken over most of the physical jobs. The intellectual jobs, a lot of them are going machine way. This is a quantum computer. I mean, there are a lot, a lot of things are going that direction. And here we have relational, okay? Now, you think about the chickens for a moment, okay? And it turned out the chickens that 5 generations down were producing a lot better were the ones who were a lot better relationally, right? Then the supercharged hyper chickens who were incredible partly because they'd been competing all of their fellow chickens sort of to the bottom of the roost. And so their success was partly at others' expense. Those who actually were in relation better, even as chickens, ended up producing a lot better. Well, here's a few studies. So this is from Deloitte. Just 24% of large companies with 50,000 or more employees are relying on functionally organized hierarchies to get work done. That's a crazy, 24%. Organizations are shifting their structures from traditional functional models towards interconnected, flexible teams. However, just 21% feel expert at building cross-functional teams, and only 12% understand the way their people work together in networks. Okay? This is Gartner. By 2028, algorithms will eliminate so many middle management jobs that work will depend almost entirely upon networks of cross-functional teams, ensembles of autonomous and high-performing teams delivering crucial outcomes. A couple quotes. This is from Keith Vazari, a leading author. The defining characteristics of the new work is radical interdependence. Top-down management still sets the budgets, but the work itself is getting done through these sprawling networks of radically independent relationships. Our relational networks have evolved into the primary medium for getting work done. Now I'm going to drumbeat this today. No individual accomplishes anything anymore organizationally. Everything's produced by relation. And the quicker on the jump we can be, and in fact, even relations that are just the relationships that are set up by an org chart are far too slow. They have to be sort of morphing relations that are arcing and connecting through organizations in keeping with the times and the demand. That's what's happening. In fact, this is a quote from Brian Cornell, the Target CEO. Nothing gets done in a single silo or function anymore. Constant collaboration is at a new premium because the big things are always led by cross-functional teams. We need people who will seek out the right solution and then figure out how to get a team together to build it. So notice, they're already on teams, but it's like figure out the right solution. And now figure out the kind of team that you have to kind of stand up and what that's going to look like. That's the modern workplace, and that's only accelerating. It's all built on our ability to relate, okay? At speed and at depth. So leadership in the digital age, one sort of idea, the way I think about it, I think about the relational web, that in the digital age, we have to have human networks that match our digital networks if we're really going to excel, okay? We have to be that tightly intertwined. So now let's get into the science of this a little bit. And here's a question. So we're here at Silicon Slopes. Does anyone know, who are the founders of Silicon Slopes? Does anyone know? Pete knows. Anyone else? Who are they, Pete? Josh. Okay. The two? Two of them? Okay. All right. I actually think that they aren't the actual founders. Pete, here's who I think the founders of Silicon Slopes are. This group right here. Now this group, this is a picture taken at the 1927 Solvay Conference on Physics. There's 17 Nobel Prize winners in that. And I say these are the founders of Silicon Slopes because almost everything that happens in tech is a result of their work in physics in the early 1900s and then thereafter. Almost everything. Everything that computers are doing, all the new advent of quantum computing, which is taking it up sort of manifold levels, it all comes out of their work, which is fascinating in its own right. We're going to get into a couple of pieces. You recognize some of these folks, right? Who do you recognize right off the bat? Well, Einstein. We all know Einstein. You recognize anybody else? Madame Curie. Two-time Nobel Prize winner, first female to win. She won in 2 categories, okay? In physics and chemistry, I think it was. Anyone else? Is Tesla? I don't know. Is Tesla? Here's Max Planck. Planck's constant, if any of you from your physics class This is Schrodinger's, Erwin Schrödinger. Ever heard of Schrödinger's cat? Okay. Werner Heisenberg, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. This is Paul Dirac, who's probably the greatest mathematician in the history of physics. And this over here is Niels Bohr, who he and Einstein, carried on, 40 years of correspondence that's driving so much of the thinking about quantum mechanics. So quantum mechanics is, anyone sort of a physics geek? Any physics geeks in here? Okay, all right. So we're a couple little sort of physics things. So Einstein himself, who basically was the first, he didn't do this alone, but he was one of the foremost voices that actually gave rise to what's known as quantum mechanics, which drives basically all of technology, even if we don't know it. It's what's driving it. He called quantum mechanics spooky science. And here's why he called it that. Because a scientist, what they like is, let's go out and figure out what the world is like. What's going on in the world? What's this thing? What's that thing? What happens when you do this to that thing? It turns out that quantum mechanics, all the answers that quantum mechanics was giving was, there isn't a world like that. That's not what the world is. We don't live in a world of things. We live in a world of relations. Now, what does that mean? Well, have you heard of like the famous double slit experiment in physics, whether light is a wave or a particle, right? Well, it turns out what's the answer to, is light a wave or a particle? It's both. And it's both based on what? When it's being watched and how it's being watched. So the answer of whether light is a particle or a wave depends on how we're interacting with light. If we interact with light one way, it's a particle. It'll say it's a particle. If we interact with another, it'll say it's a wave. Not just light. This is true of everything, it turns out, they've measured. They went to, so electrons first, and then atoms and molecules, and it's the same for everything. So you have this weird stuff. So talk about spooky science. Read this sentence and see if you like this sentence. So this is quantum mechanics. All things are the quanta of corresponding fields existing only in superposition until the wave function collapses into a point at the moment of interaction. How do we like that? Good stuff? Okay. Now, I actually love that. I geek out over that sentence. I think it's amazing, and let me tell you why. Let me tell you what it's saying. What it's saying is, we think we live in a world of things. We don't live in a world of things. We live in a world that shows up in interaction with us, and we think the way it's showing up is a thing. The way that's showing up is actually its response to us. It's all us in an activity together. Does that make sense? So light will be one thing if we interact it one way. It'll be another thing if we interact with another way. Everything, so this couple geeky physics terms, superposition means this, that before something's measured, it can be basically all over the place. And we don't know where it is, okay? We don't know where it is. It's sort of this cloud of possibility. They call that the probability wave, the wave function. And then when we interact with it, all of a sudden, boom, there the thing appears. But before we interact with it, it didn't exist. It kind of existed everywhere. But then the moment we interact, boom, there it is, okay? And Einstein said, that's spooky science, because don't we like things that are always there even if we're not looking at them? Isn't that what we want, okay? Well, let's think about this a little bit. A couple quotes by Carlo Rovelli. He's a modern physicist. Instead of seeing the physical world as a collection of objects with definitive properties, quantum theory invites us to see the physical world as a net of relations. Reality is made up of relationships rather than objects. Nothing exists except in relation. Reality is only interaction. It is only in interaction that nature draws the world. Okay? Now let's test this a little bit ourselves. So I want you to, everyone, think of two relationships. Just in your brain, I want you to think of two relationships. And I want one of them to be your most difficult. And if you're sitting next to that person, do not write that down, by the way. That's a safety tip for today. Okay? So I want you to think of your most difficult relationship. And I want you to think of the relationship what you say is like your best one, your best relationship. Your most difficult relationship, your best. Okay, you got them in your head? If you have to choose between, just pick, in those categories, pick one. Now, this I want you to write down, okay? So I want you to write down 3 words for each of these relationships that describe how you are in that relationship. Okay? So in your most difficult one, write down the 3 words that sort of describe, here's who I am, here's how I show up in this relationship. 3 words. And then I want you to do the same thing for your best relationship. 3 words that you think describe you in your best relationship. Okay? Okay, if you got it, raise your hand if you've got your 2 sets of 3 words down yet. Okay, now I'll give you 20 seconds. 20 seconds to complete those 2 sets of 3. 3 words that describe you in each relationship. Okay. All right. Okay, so here's my question for you now. Are you the same person in both of those relationships? Are those the same 3 words? Are they? Raise your hand if you have the same 3 words in both. No one. Okay? So every one of us has different. So my question then is, so which person are you? Which list is the list that describes who you are? Both. And that is, all of a sudden, when we start to see it that way, we realize, oh my word, quantum theory is really onto something. I'm not just one. I can be a lot of people. If my wife tells me, I have, by the way, I've got airport Jim, okay, and airplane Jim, okay, and I've got a bunch of Jims, and I show up differently in different contexts, right? So we're not. There's this. We like to think, oh, I'm this. And this person is that. No, actually, we're all in relationships showing up in different ways. We all have a wave function of possibility that collapses, to use physics term, boom, in the moment of interaction. There I am, showing up as a certain kind of a person. Not because that's who I am all the time, and that's who I am in my essence. It's because that's who I am in the moment, in the context of this relationship. Does that make sense? Now, that, if you think about it, so I want to give words now to what's the most important scientific discovery of the last century, and then we're going to think about what it means just generally, say, in organizations. But here's the most important. I don't think there's anything that's close to this. When we observe and measure the world, we're not observing and measuring a world separate from ourselves. We're observing and measuring our own interaction or relation with the world. Everything we see is relation. Okay? Everything we see is relation. Let's take Colleen here. So Colleen, I watch Colleen, I see Colleen, and I think I'm seeing Colleen. But notice, who's doing the watching? I am. I'm involved in what's being seen. It's not just Colleen. That's me that's seeing. And by the way, I'm seeing Colleen in response to me. That's not just independent, separate Colleen. No, that's her in response. She might be showing up in different ways with others. So everything we see, we always are measuring our interaction with the world. There's nothing else we can do. There's no outside of the world from which to observe it. We're all embedded in it. We're all in relations constantly. What we are seeing is relation. We're not seeing things, okay? Now, let's think about how's that different from how we usually think and how we normally would approach a problem. Let's take an organizational issue. Something's going wrong in the company. What's a normal way to tackle that? Something's just gone wrong. Fix it, okay. And part of fixing it might be, and your name? Heather. So Heather, part of fixing it would be what? Maybe what's the first thing I might do?
Identify what went wrong.
Yeah, what wrong and what? What went wrong and why and who's responsible for it, right? Okay. And notice, when I'm tackling it that way, without realizing it, I have failed to adopt the biggest, most important scientific discovery of the last century, which is there's no such thing as me observing a world apart from myself. If I'm a CEO of an organization, for example, there's some problem in my organization. Okay? That's my organization, and the organization's in response to me, and there's influence all over this system for this mistake. It's likely not just located in a single person who's this mistaken person. That's not to say there's not responsibilities. There are, but we're so quick to not see our own part in that. Okay? Because we're thinking in terms of things, not in terms of relations. Okay? When you think in terms of relations, everything changes. And everything gets way more powerful, by the way, the same way that quantum computers, because that's what quantum computers are going to be doing, they're not going to be thinking in binaries anymore. It's like, explodes it way out. They're way more effective, just like human beings can be when we start to think in terms of relation. Now, let's take another look at relation, another scientific look. And in terms of what's the relationship between relation and how we grow. So here's a water molecule. Okay? So let's just say that you guys over here, you're hydrogen atoms, okay? And you guys are you're oxygen atoms, okay? So look, you can just be hydrogen atoms. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. You can just hang out as a bunch of oxygen. The world needs hydrogen. You can hang out as oxygen. That's fantastic, okay? But you won't have water if that's all we do. Okay, so we just need every two of you comes over with one of these guys, and all of a sudden they combine. Okay, in relation they combine, and boom! All of a sudden something now exists that's totally different. And by the way, one of the things that's interesting is there's no such thing as a water atom. Okay, the hydrogen folks, you got to stay hydrogen, and the oxygen people, you got to stay oxygen. But you got to bind together in such a way to all of a sudden there's something entirely new that no one could have dreamed up. No oxygen atom can dream up water. And a hydrogen atom can't dream up water either because it's something beyond us. It requires an us that's not just me. And it requires me with different kinds of folks being in relation. Yeah? Now, there's a really interesting scientist who most people haven't heard of, and it's a crime because he's brilliant. His name's Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Has anyone heard of him? You have, Colleen. Okay, I'm going to give you two books. They're fascinating reads. One is called The Phenomenon of Man, and the other is called The Future of Man. Future of Man is a little easier to read. It's a collection of essays. Phenomenon of Man is sort of his famous work. But Desjardins was a Catholic priest and a paleontologist. So he was out in digs, archaeological digs. He discovered Peking man, which is a huge discovery. He was one of the scientists involved in that. But he also built this unbelievable view of how we grow, how everything evolves. And it goes like this. So he says, so we start at the level of matter. So basic pieces of matter. Okay? Well, you get this kind of matter, and they can kind of just hang out by themselves. But if they get together in certain kind of ways, then there could be combinations that come that all of a sudden create entirely new kinds of matter, higher levels of matter. And that all happens in what he calls the physiosphere, the level of matter. Those combinations then end up producing life, and you have different kinds of life forms, smaller forms, combining with larger forms and creating more and more complex forms of life. That's the biosphere. And then all the way up through the level of thought. You have the same sort of different kinds of thoughts can come together from different sources, exploding into entirely new views. That's called the noosphere. And so growth, what Desjardins taught was, there's always three elements to growth. Always. It has been this way from the beginning, and it's this way now. And in fact, this insight, I think, is the key insight on the question of remote work, by the way, of all things. Hybrid work, remote work. I think Desjardins got the big insight. And here's what it is. He says there are three parts to growth. One is compression. If pieces of matter are just all separate, they never become anything more than themselves. Does that make sense? They have to compress. They have to be on a finite globe we crowd in on each other, and all of a sudden now we get compressed, and that gives the possibility of the next level, convergence. Different things can come together in relation, and boom, all of a sudden you've got something new entirely, like water. And that's the third level. You have the emergence of something new. Compress, converge, emerge. Growth always happens that way. And here's why this, I would say, is the key set of principles for the question of remote work. Because the real challenge is, how are we going to get compression? We need, in organizations, we need minds pressing on each other, different viewpoints pressing on each other, being proximate to one another, having to grapple with one another, or all you're left with are the same thoughts we started with. There's no growth there. Things have to go up to new levels. That only happens if you get compression. So if we're working remotely, that's one of the challenges. We don't naturally get the same kind of compression. And if you don't get the compression, you're not going to get the convergence. If you don't get the convergence, you won't have new and higher and better things emerge. So if you're in a remote workplace, one of the things you'll need to solve for is, how do we create compression in a remote scenario? Now, it can be done, but you've got to be purposeful about it. Does that make sense? Compress, converge, emerge, okay? Now, so growth depends always on the level of integration and relation that is achieved. So now I want to introduce you to what we call it with the 5 levels of relation, okay? And each level of relation in an organization is going to put your organization on a different plane, a different level of what you can actually become together, what you can actually produce. And I'll sort of play it out of the water metaphor for a moment to introduce it. So think about hydrogen and oxygen atoms. We can just repel each other. We can be fighting, for example. That's one level. We can have a relationship like that. And people can be like that too. You can have individuals and organizations that are undermining each other, creating trouble. You can have that. And we call that division. So a way of relating where we're undermining each other, we use a mathematical operators, we call that division. Okay? Next level up. The hydrogen and oxygen atoms resist each other. So we're not like fighting each other, but we sort of like, we actively won't listen. If one person or group wants to go one way, we definitely don't want to go that way. We want to go somewhere else. We have this sort of level of resistance. You've ever seen that in an organization? Sure. Have you ever felt it in a relationship where you have a certain relationship where someone says something, given the nature of the relationship, you certainly don't want to do that. Sure, so we call that subtraction. That's the next level up, subtraction. Then the hydrogen and oxygen atoms, we might just be happy hanging with our own kind. Put it in organizational terms, sales department, we can hang with the sales folks, and marketing can hang with the marketing folks, and the engineers are all happy being with the engineers. We can do that, okay? And we call that addition, where we just coexist. That's better than the other two. At least we're not getting in each other's way and creating that kind of trouble. But we're also not getting any synergies of scale that way, cross-functionally. Okay? Next level up, the hydrogen and oxygen atoms are willing to cooperate. We call that multiplication. They're now cooperating. You see that in organizations. Now, yeah, we do our jobs like we were doing at addition, but now we're actively helping other people to do theirs cross-functionally as well. That's multiplication. The world's scrambling organization to get the multiplication level. And I'll show you our research on this. In fact, I'm going to involve you in the research in just a moment. But there's still another level up that's really the big one. This is the big kahuna. And if you can get here, or if you can be heading this direction, what it means for you organizationally is something that competitors, they're not going to be able to match that, okay? And it's just incredible the power that you mobilize when you get this in an organization. In this case, the hydrogen and oxygen atoms open themselves to each other and combine in a deep way. We actually join, and as a result of that, we are changed. Functionally, we're changed. What we're doing is taking everyone else into account. Right at our core, we call this compounding, where we integrate an operation. Okay? And we can be showing up at any of these levels, and we can be at different levels with different teams. We can be at one level inside a company, and we can be at a different level of relation with our customers. You can have customer sets. Think about your customers, those who are customer-facing, and you can quantify, you can sort of categorize your relational levels with your customers in these same ways. So now let's sort of test it just a little bit. This is just this is just by analogy, the math. I mean, if you have a team of 5 and they're dividing, they're undermining each other, they're going to have an output that's less than 5. Same with resisting or subtraction. It's going to be less than 5. If we're adding, we're doing our own stuff, okay, we'll do our own 1, 1, 1, we'll add it up, we produce at a level of 5. If we can get to multiplying, this is why the world is trying to fight the multiplication so much. You get synergies where we're helping each other succeed. It's 5 times 5. You're producing at a level of 25. But if you can integrate deeply, So every part of the organization is now taking all the other parts of the organization into account in their every move. You compound, you're 5 to the 5th, and that's a massive number, over 3,000. Now, that's just an analogy, but it's sort of, that's the kind of thing that opens up as you move up in levels of relation. So let's just look at this. So here's a team, here's an organization. What level is this? We got fists. That's division, okay? That's level 1, that's division, undermining. How about this one? That's level 2, we're resisting, right? We're resisting, and that's subtraction. How about this one? We're just coexisting. We might be like doing a great job in our various departments, our various roles, but we're just sort of head down during our roles. Okay, that's addition. What's this? That's multiplication. We're now cooperating actively across the divides. That's fantastic. But notice there's still divides. What does compounding look like, do you suppose? What do you think? They don't have circles, Carrie? Okay, so somehow the divides have to be different. It's not going to feel like divides, okay? So we're going to take this in 2 parts, just so you can see. One thing that happens is everyone else is integrated in me. I mean, I'm thinking of the whole operation. I don't know if you've ever heard the distinction between I-shaped leaders and T-shaped leaders. Do you know that distinction? So I-shaped leaders are thinking about their own function, their own part of the organization. It's sort of an addition sort of view. T-shaped leaders are thinking about all the way cross-functionally across the organization. In addition to their own, they are integrating across the T, that's T-shaped. And so that's happening here. So everyone sort of is inside me. The whole organization's inside of every other part of the organization. And as a result, you have all of these connections across, and you're part of one group, okay? Now, one of the things that's interesting to think about is, this is just thinking about a company, but we can be the same way with our customers and with our clients. We can be compounding inside the company and have our clients being totally on the outside of it. What would it mean for our clients to actually be inside that circle and be part of the company? What would that even mean? What would it look like? What would compounding look like with customers? That's a really fascinating question to explore. All right. Let me give you one example here. This fellow here is Bob Miller. So Bob, I met Bob when he was a sales leader at IBM. He led the East Coast sales part of IBM for the commercial sector. Okay, so anyone who was for the communications sector, any communications companies, East Coast US, all the way down Latin America actually, Bob led it. Now, so IBM was organized by these sales sectors. You had communications, that was Bob's. You had manufacturing, you had education, you had government. You have all these sales verticals. And then they had a one that spanned all, it didn't matter, it spanned all of the kinds of organizations, but it was actually categorized by volume. So if it was a small account, it wasn't yet in one of the sectors. It was handled by small and medium business. Does that make sense? And they're growing the account. But if it crosses a threshold, then it goes to one of the other sectors. Okay? Well, so Bob gets one of these one day. He gets a customer coming over from the successful work of the small and medium business group who grew a commercial client or a communications client to the level that now it crossed a threshold. It's now Bob's client. Now, how do you feel if you're this small and medium business sales leader, by the way? Not real happy. I mean, they put blood, sweat, and tears into this. We lost our best account. So Bob's thinking, if Bob's thinking, if he's thinking at level 1, division or subtraction or addition, for example, he's like, great, it's the way it goes. But he starts to get up to those upper 2 levels, and he's starting to thinking, especially in compounding, he's thinking, what would it be like to be John? Put in all the work, he loses the best account. They don't get any money out of that anymore. And they put in all the work. And Bob thought, that doesn't feel right to me. So he called John, and he said, hey, John, first of all, congratulations, amazing job on this account. Fantastic. And we're going to try, to take the baton and do as good a job as you've done. But I've been thinking about it. He said, I don't feel right. It doesn't feel right to me that we're just going to get one of your best accounts and you don't get a benefit from that. So I'm wondering, is there a way maybe we could split revenues with you going forward or something? So I was just calling to talk about that. What do you think? What do you think John thought? Yeah, that sounds pretty good. So, and they work something out. Well, that wasn't like built by the company, IBM up top. That's like people thinking in the moment, relationally, boom. That is relation in action, where now you're making water. These two organizations are coming together in a way. Small and medium business and the commercial sales sector, they're not going to work the same together anymore after that, right? It's a totally different kind of a union. That's an example of compounding. Here's another one. Anyone into F1? Who's watched like Drive to Survive? Has anyone watched it? Okay, all right. I got hooked on Drive to Survive on Netflix. I'd never watched F1 before. So this is a pit stop. This is Ferrari pit stop. And how long do you think a pit stop's going to take? F1 people don't talk to me. So what do you think? 3 seconds? That would be smoking. That would be really smoking. Other guesses? 20 seconds? 6? Okay, now you're coming up, Dave. Yeah, 3 was a little aggressive. Now to 6. I feel like an auctioneer up here. Dave, you want to go higher? Okay, so let's just watch this. There's going to be like 20 seconds go by where the pit crew is getting ready for the car to come in. Just watch. This one. You were actually guessed high the first time, Dave. That one was about, I think, 2.4 seconds. You want to see the world record? World record, Red Bull team, 2018. Here's the world record. Watch, this one goes fast. .82 seconds. Okay. Now, you don't get like that unless you really integrate deeply, right? Like totally become one team. Everyone has their own roles. You don't not become hydrogen, not become oxygen. You've got your job. But man, you unite into one organism in a way that, wow, how do you compete with that? Okay? Okay, now, we're going to do a little thing here. This is going to take about 5 minutes. Take out your phones, and I'm going to have you take a 20-question survey. Just rip through this. All right, so I'm going to give you, that should be popping in here momentarily. I'm going to walk through what you're going to see, and then you can compare your numbers. So you're going to get a convergent score for your organization, which is a way of looking at the relational field, the relational strength of your organization, and it's organized this way. So think of an organization in terms of 4 quadrants. So you have individuals or organizations that are doing things. That's the behavioral area. They have got their own personal attitudes. That's the attitudinal area. Then you have the organizational side. You've got the structures and systems and processes of an organization. And then you have the organizational culture. All of these things, whenever you're working a change effort, it's really important to be thinking in 4 dimensions, not just one. You might have a favorite, like you love to think about attitude issues, or you really want to tackle things with a behavioral solution. That's great, but you're going to find that you're going to plateau in your efforts unless you're actually thinking 4-dimensionally. So this assessment measures 5 attributes in each of these 4 quadrants. Here's what's being measured. You can take a picture of that you like, but it'll all be in the report for you. And if you think about this, what these 4 quadrants do is they are the predicates that equip an organization, the relationships to be really productive or not in an organization. You might think about it like this. It's like a playing field on which all of the relations across the organization are happening at whatever levels they're happening. And if you have structural problems, cultural issues, behavioral challenges, attitudinal problems, that's going to weaken your relational web, the relational field, the relational strength of your organization. Your convergence score, it's scored, actually, your score is going to be skewed a little bit high because this version of the test, we didn't include the bottom level division. We just started a subtraction, so your score is going to skew a little bit higher than the norm. But we measure each of those 4 quadrants. and you'll get a number. So here, by the way, this is the average score. This is the average profile in a research across industries. Organizations average out at 2.36, which is between addition and multiplication, but on the lower side of that between, okay? And the lowest quadrant is, on average, structure, okay? But what'll happen is, if we did an analysis of your organization, which we could do, and you get all the data from across the whole organization, you get all kinds of interesting views of what's happening in different levels, different verticals, and where people are, because there'll be different viewpoints of what the organization is doing and how it's performing. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to give you, we work with organizations to assess the relational strength across the organization four-dimensionally and help them sort of form attack plans on how they're going to build that out. And one of the things we use is something we call the 7 rules of relation. And I want to give you a couple of those here today. A couple of the rules of relation. Here's rule of relation number 1: help others succeed. So we're gonna do a little something. You're gonna need a piece of paper that you turn sort of landscape on your table. Okay. So we're gonna remember we talked about early on that in this new era of work, it's not about just the org chart, what says the teams are. You got to have these. You have to have these sort of teams forming, all the time, flexing and forming. So I want you to build what we're going to call your team right now. So you think about whatever it is you're involved in your company or your life project. I want you to think about who can help you achieve your organizational and career goals. Who are those people, ideally, that you would have on your team? They might be all the people on your team at work. They might be a mentor or two. They might be a couple of other cross-functional colleagues. Who do you need on your team if you're really going to succeed organizationally or in your career? Who are those people? So here's how I want you to organize it. I want you to first write your name on the top left, okay, of your chart. All right, leave a little bit of space. Sorry, it's not quite the top. Leave a little space, because then you're going to write those people sort of across horizontally. However many people, who ideally is on your team? Who do you need as part of that team if you're just going to succeed in your role at work, in your career, path, or whatever that is? Who are those folks? Okay, I'll give you another 15 seconds. Who are the folks you need? Think big. I mean, it's like, ideally, this is really who I need on my team. Need to be able to work and collaborate with this person, and I need their help. Okay, who's on your team? Okay. All right, next one down. So now, what I want you to do on your chart, I want you to rate your level of relation right now for each one of those people. So now again, you're not rating them and you're not rating you. We're talking about the level of relation, okay? We're not talking about individuals. Things are an illusion. Relation is what's real. So right now, is this a division relationship? Is it subtraction? Is it addition? Is it multiplication? Is it compounding? Just make a notation for under each name, rating that level of relation. By the way, if I don't really know what they're up to, if I don't know what their objectives and what are, then I might not even know if I'm getting in their way. I might be getting in their way if I don't even know what they're trying to accomplish. That might mean I might potentially be a subtraction level in this case. I might be getting in their way and I don't even know. Just give yourself a rating. Okay. Okay. 10 more seconds. 10 more seconds. By the way, we do this with executive teams, for example. We'll build a relational field with an entire executive team where on one chart, every relation is rated in terms of level of relation. You're going to see, because if there are any cracks in the executive team, by the way, they're chasms down further in the organization. And you can see where's the subtraction happening, the addition, the multiplication. In real time, boom, you just see it. And now it gives you huge leverage to be able to work at the level of relation, which is way quicker than working on individuals, it turns out. Okay, so you've given yourself ratings. Now, I want you to translate that to a score. So anything that was division is a 0. Anything that's subtraction is a 1. Anything that's addition is a 2. Multiplication is a 3. Compounding is a 4. Give yourselves a number for each relation. Okay. All right, you got numbers? Okay, now we're going to run a calculation. So I want you to sum the scores up first. Add up those numbers. Give yourself whatever the sum is. Okay. Write that down. Then, now we're going to high order math here. Now I want you to divide that by the number of people. Number of relations you just gave. So in this case, it adds up to 13 divided by 7 people. That's a score of 1.85. So run your calculation, and what do you come up with? What do you come up with? Who's run the calculation? Raise your hand if you've run it. Shout out, what's your number? 2.16, okay. 2.56? What was that? 2.5. 2.8. 2.16? Okay. So you might think of this as, now this is your own team. This isn't just the org chart team. Might involve your org chart people, but maybe some other folks as well. You might think about, this is your current relationality score, okay? Your current relationality score. If I'm at 2.2, I'm a little bit more than addition on average here in these relationships. But this gives you a way to think about, what do I need to do? What do I need to start focusing on? This is you individually. You can do it collectively if you're working as a whole team across an organization. It gives you just really interesting sight lines to be working on, it turns out, what's real, what's producing everything, which are the relations. What we're going to add to this now, I want you to think of, given the scores and given the importance of the relationships, I want you to identify the 3 of those maybe you need to work on the most. Just maybe star 3 of them. What are the 3 you might need to give attention to? Okay. And all right, now we're going to take it one more level on this first rule of relation. So I want you to pick 2 of those 3 that you just starred. And I want you to do this. I want you to list their key workplace objectives. Right now, and best as you know them, pick 2 of them. Here's what I think they're trying to achieve. These are their key objectives. Just jot them down beneath their names. By the way, if you don't know what they are, then that's a note to self to do what? I got to go find that out. Okay? Okay? All right, now I want you to pick one of those. One of the 2 you just wrote down, their objectives, I want you to pick one of them. I want you to think of something you think you could do that would be helpful to this person toward helping them achieve their objectives. Something you think might help them that you'd be willing to do. Okay. Okay, now, so my invitation is, with regard to that person, do that, offer that, go have a conversation, see if you can do that. And then here's a way you can think about, and this again, this is one sort of application of rule of relation number one, which is help others succeed. Here's a way you can start thinking about everyone on your team. You can think about people at your home life too in the same way. What can you do? And as you do this, you'll start growing that relationality in that relation, and you'll become more and more like water as opposed to sort of separate entities. Okay, now, I want to share one other real relation with you, and I want to give you a choice. We have time to do one. One more, so of the 7. So one more, we can either do tell on yourself or connect, don't just interact. Who wants to get into tell on yourself? Raise your hand. Who wants to don't just interact, connect? Okay, all right, we'll go to that one. All right. So you missed out on Disney, but there it is. Okay, don't just interact. After all, machines can do that, okay? Only people can connect. So let's get into how do we connect. So I want you to imagine you're about to hit this stage, okay? You're about to go out on this stage to give a speech, okay? What are you feeling right now? Terrified? Underdressed. Okay, yeah. Unprepared, maybe? Yeah. So I want you to think for a moment, we'll come back to it. What would connecting with people mean in that environment? Because you can give a speech and not connect at all. And you can give a speech and actually there's really deep connection. What's the difference? What does it look like? Okay, just keep that in mind. How about this? This has been life for a lot of us. What does connection look like in this context? You know, as opposed to just interacting. We can interact all the time, but how many times are we actually connecting? And what does that mean? And what does it look like? Or, how about this? You ever been in a situation like this? Yeah, so what is connection going to mean here? What does it look like? How do we get there? So let's think about connection for a moment. Let's think about human beings. So one way to think about us as human beings is all of us have what you might think of as an insight, our depth. So this would be, you know, our experiences, our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, our desires, our fears, our preferences, our heartaches, our joy. We have this depth to us, this interior to us, right? We all have that. Machines don't, by the way. And that's why if we don't connect at this level, we're no better than machines at the end of the day. And by the way, if we don't connect at the level of depth, a machine can do the other interacting as well as we can, and they'll have our job, okay? The jobs that are going to be valued are the ones who are really great relationally, which is going to involve actually being humans, okay, and not just being machines. And we have an outside. So this is our face to the world, our external actions, our words, our behaviors, and the exterior image or reputation that we want others to see. We've got that too, sort of shells around us, if you will. And we don't maybe keep the inside of us, we sort of keep that hidden, perhaps. So now let's think about that for a moment. And so this outside, if we let it acts like a wall, because what it's doing is it's dividing our depth, our interior, what's really human about us, from everything that's on the outside, okay? So it really acts like a wall. And if we're going to connect, there's something specific that needs to happen. There's a really wonderful French thinker. His name's Gabriel Marcel, and he's written a lot of wonderful things, but I love this quote. The person who has broken open is available and hospitable to others. The doors of his soul are ajar. So he's inviting us. We need to keep the doors of our souls ajar, not closed by this exterior shell all the time. It looks like this. So you have sort of these penetrations, like actually people are getting through. I'm feeling others. I'm alive to them, okay? This is what he means by keeping the doors of our soul. It's not wide open here, okay? I'm sort of peeking out in places, but there's gaps, there's spaces, okay? Now here's 4 connection blockers in my experience, and you can just compare this in your own, but There's probably many more, but here's at least 4. And these will block you every time and will keep you, you will not be able to, you'll never get to compounding. We cannot get to compounding without this kind of connection. You can maybe top out at multiplication. But here are the blockers. Masks that we hide behind, okay? So if I have a mask that I sort of hide myself behind, that will always keep me disconnected. Images that we're trying to put out to the world, we're wanting the world to see us in a certain kind of a way. That's part of our external presentation that will always keep us from connecting, okay? Control, trying to dominate or be in charge, will always cut off connection. And then finally, detachment, keeping others at an emotional distance. So I can't feel them. I don't want to feel them. That will also cut off connection. Now, I get sometimes we might feel the need to do that. I understand that. I understand why we might do all of these. I do all of them myself. But I also know from that experience, whenever I do those, I don't connect. Okay, they're linked. Okay, so let's think of 2 leaders. 2 leaders. One's like this one at the top, and one's down here at the bottom. So which leader can see more clearly? The bottom one. Why? Because the doors are open. Because I'm not only sort of keeping people out, I can't see clearly when I've got my doors all shut either. I think I've seen clearly. I think I see a bunch of things out there that I know what they are, and I've totally missed out. No, only everything I'm seeing is relation. It's all me that I'm seeing, and it's all in response to a closed-off me. Which leader can feel more empathy? The bottom one. Which leader do you want to follow? Which one would you rather follow, top or bottom? Bottom, yeah, me too. So now let's think about this relational dimension then. So we have our depths and we have our surfaces. So when 2 or more people really connect, think about water here for a moment. A new reality gets born that's beyond either of us, actually. It's not only inside of me and it's not only inside of you. There's something new that arises. Kind of a new dimension emerges. Buber called this, Martin Buber, one of my favorite thinkers, he called it the between or the interhuman dimension. Gabriel Marcel called it the intersubjective, and he called it communion, where we really commune with each other. I love that. Jan Gebser, another fascinating thinker. If you want your mind to be blown, read a book called The Ever-Present Origin by Jan Gebser. Just blow your mind. He called this the aperspectival place. That is the place from where separate perspectives are transcended. We're out of just our own place. But whatever you call it, this is how you make water. Okay? This is how you actually compound, converge, emerge into something new. There's something that's created that's beyond us. It's how you make water, and it only happens through connection. Now, I want to give you an example of this. I want to tell you a story. Oh, while I'm telling you this, if you want to get into a couple things, we'll see if this works. If you try this other QR card, there's a couple white papers that I've written, a bunch, but here's 2 based on topics that we've covered today: achieving 4-dimensional change and then breaking open, unlocking human connection. If you want to get those, we'll send them to you. So you shoot that, and then I'll tell you the story that was from that slide, and then we can take any questions you might have before we go. So one of the most powerful leadership moments I've ever experienced was with a leadership team of lawyers, actually, in a big company in the defense industry. And I was with this group. It was a group of about 20 lawyers, headed up by the general counsel, chief counsel general. It was the VP and general counsel of the company. His name was Don Ellerman, now retired. Don was about 6'6", tall guy, kind of a gentle giant of a guy, really smart, really kind person. And actually had 3 days with Don and his leadership team. So that's kind of a rare thing. You have 3 consecutive days. On the night of the second day, before everyone was leaving, I took Don aside. I said, Don, there's something I'd like you to do tomorrow. That if you can do it, it'll be the most important thing that happens. But if you can't do it well, I'm not going to let you do it. Because it'd be a big mistake. So I'm going to tell you what it is now, and I want you to think about it overnight, and then let's visit. Come a little early in the morning, let's visit, and we'll see whether you're ready to do this thing tomorrow or not. He said, okay, what is it? So I said, what I'd like you to do is I want you to think about how you get in the way of your team. Spend some time tonight thinking about how do you get in the way of your team? How do you make things harder for them? And then in the morning, come back and tell me what you think, what you've seen. He said, okay. So he comes back the next morning, a little early. And I said, he said, actually, I didn't sleep all that much last night. And I said, really, why? And he told me what he'd realized. And I could tell from the way he told me that, he could share that with the team. This is right. I could let him do this. So this is what Don did. This was in the afternoon of day 3. Don Ellerman stands up. Don's a good guy. He stands up in front of the group, and he says, look, I'm in this really enviable position where I've hired all of you. I mean, who gets that chance? You assemble their entire team. I've hired all of you, and you're remarkable people. He says, but there's something you probably don't know. And he says, what you don't know is I'm afraid of most of you. And the reason I'm afraid of you is that I think there are a lot of you here in this room who'd be better VPs and general counsel of this company than me. And as a result of that, I don't know if you've noticed, he said, I've kept, you're gonna be able to see it now that I tell you this, he said, I've kept most of the high profile, where you really notice sort of things, to myself. I've done those things. Because I'm afraid that if you do those things, you take my job. So what I'm feeling is that that's wrong. I don't want to be that guy. And that's wrong for you, toward you. And so up till now, I've honestly, I think, as I've been thinking about it, I think I've viewed my job as to keep my job. And I think now my job is to help you take my job. That's my job. That's what I wanted to share. Now, what do you think the connection was like in that room? What's your guess? Is that a surface level sort of communication? No. I mean, there's a guy who's cracking open in all the best ways. His doors are opening, and he's letting out. And he's both letting out and letting in at the same time. Those happen together, or they don't happen at all. We let ourselves out and we let others in. And by the way, Don, and I worked with Don then through the rest of the time until he retired from the company. A guy who's so good at helping other people take their job is never out of a job, right? I mean, that's the very best kind of leader that you can have. So there's a guy who really, if you think about the first rule of relation we talked about was help others succeed. He was announcing, that's my job, is to help you succeed. We didn't cover tell on yourself, but was Don Ellerman telling on himself? Yeah. That's what accountability looks like in action, by the way, is people who actually tell on themselves. And Don was telling on himself. And Don was connecting because it wasn't just surface anymore. And he was allowing himself to feel and to be changed by the other people in his organization. And he became bigger as a result of it because he let other people in. We grow as we let other people in. Our souls expand. And as long as we keep that all covered, we just stay, I'm just me. I'm just a hydrogen atom. Or I'm just an oxygen atom. But if we can let people in, we expand. And those levels of relation and what they enable, both personally and organizationally, it's off the charts. Okay? So again, if you're interested, you can dive into to either or both of those white papers. Any question, anything that's on your mind based on what we've talked about? Anything you're wondering about? Got 5 minutes or so. Yes, back here first. Oh, well, this one, yeah. What's your name? Victoria. Victoria, yeah.
I was reflecting on a couple different companies I've been in, and I would love to hear your thoughts on, so say we recognize that our company isn't at that multiplication or compounding level, but we're not necessarily in a leadership position to
Yeah.
affect that. What is the best way that more of those lower management or someone that's not a VP can make the difference that can really help transform?
Okay, so 2 thoughts. So remember, one chart, we just covered it really close, really fast, but remember the 4 quadrants? There's sort of behavior and attitude on the left and structure and culture on the right. When you're young in an organization without a lot of authority yet, you basically are a consumer of what's on the right. You're consuming the structures and the systems and processes and the culture. You're on the receiving end of all that. But you own your own behaviors and attitude, right? Even from the first day you're hired. Now, as you climb the leadership, levels, you always own your behaviors and attitudes, always. So, but you also start to own the structures and the culture of the place as well. You have responsibility for those also. So point one is, I will not, even if I'm lower in an organization, I will never be able to have influence that exceeds how I'm performing on those two sides of the organization that I own. That is, my own behaviors and my own attitudes. So I got to show up super well there. Now, that'll give me credibility even when I don't have the authority on the org chart yet. Then at that point, it's like you'd need to find like a sponsor, more senior sponsor in the organization who's seeing things sort of the way you are. And I mean, we do this all the time, because one of the things we do at Withy is we actually can do an assessment of the organization that's fascinating. We'll give you a 4-quadrant look relationally at what's going on all across the organization. And when your leaders see that, there's, in fact, Withy's existed now for 2 years. Every time we've done, as a first step, the analysis, every organization, they all say, we're doing this now. No one's ever not. Because what illuminates is so obviously like critical. It's like we have to do this. In fact, it opens your eyesight to a whole dimension of organizational. You never even thought in terms of relation before. We're still thinking in terms of things. We're thinking of this thing department and that thing department and this thing person and that thing person. No, that's all sort of out of context. Relation's what's real. And when you cut your organization, you get the viewpoint of the levels of relation. Man, there's no going back at that point. So that's what I would say. Own the left 2 quadrants, show up that way, find the right kind of sponsor, and then you try to introduce sort of a need. Okay? Yeah. Who was the hand over here? Who were you saying someone over here was first? Okay, yes, go ahead.
So I'm going to apologize. I'll try to make this. I love the plus, divide, multiply, rating people, and then you asked who are the people that maybe need some work. I'm assuming you meant like your challenge relationships.
Yes.
That's my assumption. However,
Yeah.
as I've thought about it since then, does your research show anything yet whether or not it's more valuable to focus on neutral or positive relations? So I have one person who's a compounder in my life, and I actually start that person because that person, there's already so much synergy, and that person is so, I'm so like,
Yeah.
that compounding effect is so important that I
Yeah.
wouldn't also say, oh, that doesn't need any help. It actually needs
That's a great point.
a ton of nurturing. But
Can I stop you just for a second before you take that? I wouldn't say this is a compounding person. There are no compounding people or not. The relation is compounding. Exactly. Which involves you, by the way. You're in the middle of that too. But yeah, go ahead.
so, does your research show that there is more benefit by taking, like I have someone who's just a plus?
Yeah. No, the person's not a plus. The relationship's a plus. Yes.
Would it be more beneficial to start with your neutral / already somewhat functioning relationship versus taking the 2 people that I have their lab divisions
Yeah.
and saying, let me focus on this relationship?
Like Roland, for example. Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you done that level of research where you say it's easier to focus on something that's already
Yeah.
somewhat functioning versus something that's very
Yeah, and there's no one answer to that, because it will totally depend on, for example, what the job is, what the project is, because you have to also think in terms of strategic importance of things. There's long-term things, there's short-term things. Those are all real. And so sometimes you got to dive into the tough things. There's something we got to wade into this tough thing right now, because there's no tomorrow, right? But you're exactly right that relations are always dynamic. Just because we're compounding now doesn't mean we're going to be compounding tomorrow. So leaning into that, continuing to lean into that's fantastic. I think it's a great intuition. But I wouldn't say that there's, as a matter of strategy across the board, that's why I said you decide where you're going to start. Whatever's speaking to you, you start there, and it's likely to be different across everyone in the room. That's not a real satisfying answer, but it's the best one I can give. So sorry, yeah, Matthias.
So when you look at it from an organization level, like she was talking about, if you're the leader of an organization and you do this assessment and you see these gaps or these chasms,
Yeah.
what do? What teachings, principles, interventions, how do you help an organization?
Well, that's what we do. Yeah, I mean, that's what we do at Withy is we help, we can scope out an entire organization so you can see what's going on in all the pockets and the verticals and the horizontals. And then together with, it's typically the leadership team, we put together the plan. So here, you see what the data's saying, and it's usually with us, it's a combination of data and we're doing in-person interviewing too, some level of that, so we get the narrative dimension. And then, we deliver that view, and it's like, okay, here's what we would recommend, here's what we're seeing, here's what we recommend, but let's think about, the best way to scope that out. So it unfolds differently every time. There are key elements that we bring to bear because they're so bedrock, like the 7 rules of relation are just huge, like thinking 4-dimensionally. I've spent most of my professional life thinking 1-dimensionally. And to come to the understanding that actually, you got to start thinking 4-dimensionally if you're gonna. Organizations are complex. You don't change everything in an organization only by changing 1 dimension. You'll top out. So helping organizations and leaders to think about their issues 4-dimensionally and scope out what to do about them, and then we give all the support for that, which we do. There's a lot of things. We consult around that. We coach around that. We do some training around that as well. But yeah. Was there other hands? Yes. Your name, by the way? Christine? Yeah.
So I really love the idea of these collaborative relationships. I find in a lot of those that it's very easy to get overwhelmed very quickly with a lot of things going on. So how do you balance this compounding relationships with not overstepping roles and responsibilities?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Now, this is a really important strategic question. Did y'all hear that? Because, look, we have limited bandwidth as people, too. It's like, to have like these individual compounding relationships with 1,000 people, it doesn't really happen that way. But that's actually not the way that it works. Think about it. Think about Desjardins' insight about matter coming together and the biosphere things coming together, at the idea level things coming together. We work in groups. Human beings always work in groups. There's no such thing as individuals didn't survive. Groups survived, and individuals that threatened a group threatened everyone, threatened everything. So we work in groups, but the next level up, that group is the individual. Does that make sense? So this group can work with other groups. So individuals are working, and they form a group. This group is itself an entity that's working with other groups, and all the way up the chain, you get higher and higher order levels of coming together. So I would feel overwhelmed if it was just like me as an individual having to all those connections. That's not how it works. Who's my team, like we were starting to build? I need to make sure that those we want to grow those relation levels. But then, okay, that group as a group, now we're an individual in a way. We're a single entity. Who are the other groups of individuals then that we're going to combine with? And how do we expand and converge at the next level up? That's how growth always happens. But if we think only individually, you get tapped out and you get overwhelmed, right? But the same principles apply at the individual and the group level. Group's just an individual in collective form is all it is. Any other questions? Then let me leave you just with this. So nothing in organizations happens because of one person. Relation produces everything. Map and build relation. That's like a superpower, and most people don't know about it, okay? It's not a lever they know exists to pull, okay? But if you learn how to start pulling that level, you'll bring all kinds of new possibilities into an organization, okay? All right, you guys. Thanks for coming.
All right. Jim, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Just a couple of quick things as we close out here. If you're like me, and I think many of you are, not only have you learned something, but hopefully you've also felt something. My thought and recommendation is to don't wait. Whatever it is that you've been thinking, feeling that you need to do to act, don't wait to do it, especially when it comes to these people in your teams and in your lives, especially when we consider these principles in our own personal lives, to definitely don't hesitate, don't wait to make these things happen. A couple of final things, just kind of in closing. For those who are looking for work and those who are hiring, again, an invitation to come over here at the end to hang out by the chairs and connect there. Also, Trey found some of his business cards, so swing by. He's better at marketing than he thinks. Also, there is for those interested, there is an event that starts at 7 tonight, goes to 9, over at the Tribe House building over in Pleasant Grove, if you're familiar. It's kind of behind the Village Baker off of Pleasant Grove Boulevard. And that event is all about angel investing, and especially for those who are interested in learning about and how to get into angel investing. So that should be pretty cool, 7 tonight at the Tribe House building. Also, again, just if you're not part of the chapter but would like to, these events are free, but sponsored and supported by people like Silicon Slopes, Kiln, and our food sponsors. So we'd love to have you come join us for our next ones. The next one is coming up, I want to say it's on April 26th. It's going to be here. At 11:30 to 1:30, there's going to be lunch, and that's going to be all about product marketing. This Thursday, there's also kind of a last-second event we put together. So we're collaborating with LinkedIn. One of their employees is going to be doing a workshop on how to overhaul your personal LinkedIn profile. That's going to be virtual. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you'll get all the posts and updates on that. You can look me up at Pete Larkin on LinkedIn. Again, that's this Thursday, and I want to say it's also at 11:30, but that one's virtual, not going to be in person. So anyway, one more round of applause for Jim and for our sponsors. Thank you for coming, everybody. Appreciate it.